In the heat of World War II, a sniper took a shot that defied all odds. Using a technique no one had ever taught him, he banked a rifle round off steel, hitting a target no one thought possible. This single shot saved hundreds of lives, but the name of the man who changed sniper tactics forever remains a secret, buried in history.
In the blink of an eye, the world was changed forever.
At precisely 12:47 p.m. on March 14, 1944, Corporal James Jimmy Keller pressed his eye to the scope of his Springfield M1903, observing a German observation post across the Rapido River Valley. The target was situated in what should have been impenetrable cover, a reinforced concrete bunker with firing slits designed to avoid any direct line of sight. For 3 weeks, Allied snipers had attempted to suppress the position. 17 men had died trying to assault it head-on. Despite the artillery fire, the German observer inside remained unscathed, calling in precise artillery strikes that killed 8 Americans every day. In the next 4 minutes, Keller would take a single shot, threading his bullet through a structural gap the size of a playing card, striking a target that Army doctrine had deemed unreachable. Within 6 weeks, Keller's innovative technique would be adopted by Allied snipers across Italy, credited with neutralizing 127 enemy positions and saving an estimated 340 lives. This is the story of how a Boston pool hall hustler revolutionized sniper tactics using geometry that had never crossed the minds of West Point instructors. James Keller's story began in Charlestown, Massachusetts, where he grew up in a cramped 3-room tenement filled with the smell of boiled cabbage and motor oil. His father worked long hours at the Charlestown Navy Yard, loading munitions for meager wages during the Great Depression. Jimmy spent most of his childhood at Murphy's Pool Hall on Main Street, not because he was looking for trouble, but because he had a unique gift. While other boys played stickball, Jimmy, just 12 years old, was calculating deflection angles off cushions, sinking seemingly impossible combination shots that defied the laws of physics. Frank Murphy, the pool hall owner, quickly noticed the boy's remarkable talent. "You think in ricochets," Murphy once told him. "Most people see the ball and the pocket. You see everything the ball could hit between here and there." Keller never completed high school, dropping out at 16 to take over his father's work when his father's back gave out. By 1942, he was managing a rigging crew, reading engineering blueprints, and calculating load-bearing angles for ship repairs. When Pearl Harbor was attacked, Keller enlisted the following morning. The recruiter saw a crane operator on his application and sent him to Fort Benning for infantry training. The rifle range at Fort Benning would change Keller's life forever. Keller qualified as an expert marksman, scoring high enough that his instructors checked for cheating. However, what stood out to them wasn't just his accuracy, it was his unconventional shooting positions. While other recruits fired from prone, kneeling, or standing, Keller sought out strange angles, shooting from behind obstacles, under barriers, and even off reflective surfaces. "Kid shoots like he's playing geometry, not war," one sergeant wrote in his file. This unique approach earned Keller a position as a sniper, and he was shipped to North Africa, Sicily, and eventually the Italian mainland with the 36th Infantry Division. By March 1944, Keller had 19 confirmed kills. Standard work, nothing out of the ordinary. He followed the usual doctrine: find a high position, calculate range, factor in the wind, and fire. The Germans fell, and the war continued. Then came the Rapido River Valley. The Gustav Line fortifications were a testament to 18 months of German engineering ingenuity. Every bunker, pillbox, and observation post had been designed by men who knew that concrete and positioning could overpower firepower. The Allies had bombarded these positions for weeks, but the Germans remained safe underground, emerging after the explosions to continue their deadly work. One observation post, in particular, had become notorious for its resilience. Known as Strong Point 7, it was a concrete bunker built into the mountainside, just 480 yards from American lines. The German spotter had a direct view of the valley floor and could call down artillery within seconds whenever Allied troops attempted to move. Standard sniper doctrine called for suppression of the observer, but Strong Point 7 was a different animal. The firing slit was positioned perpendicular to likely sniper angles. The concrete walls were 3 feet thick, and the slit itself was only 18 inches wide by 8 inches tall. The German observer remained well back from the slit, making it nearly impossible to hit. Lieutenant Marcus Chen of the 141st Infantry Regiment was the first to try. On March 1, 1944. At 6:15 a.m., Chen positioned himself 520 yards northeast of Strong Point 7. Hoping to take advantage of the morning light to silhouette the German observer, he fired, but his shot struck 6 inches to the left of the slit. The Germans responded quickly. Chen was killed almost instantly. Sergeant William Morrison tried next. On March 4, 1944, firing 17 rounds aimed at the slit, hoping to force the German observer back. None of his rounds hit the target, and the Germans returned fire, launching a mortar barrage that killed Morrison and 2 of his men. Private First Class Eddie Donovan made the third attempt on March 8, 1944. Donovan, a 20-year-old boxer from Brooklyn, tried to advance under smoke cover. He was gunned down before he could get close. Keller watched Morrison die. They'd shared a foxhole just the night before. Morrison had shown him pictures of his daughter, Sarah, and promised her a summer of fishing at Lake Texoma. The next day, Morrison was buried in a mass grave with 17 other men. The German observer remained operational. Keller spent the next 6 days studying the bunker, sketching diagrams on cigarette packages and calculating firing angles with a carpenter's protractor. The problem wasn't the bunker's strength, it was that everyone had been thinking in straight lines. Direct shots, direct assaults, direct suppression. The German engineers had designed the bunker to counter direct threats. But Keller wasn't thinking in straight lines. He was thinking in ricochets. On March 12, he approached Captain Raymond Hayes during the morning briefing. "Sir, I need permission to attempt Strong Point 7, Keller said. Hayes looked up from his coffee. "Keller, 3 snipers have tried. All dead." "They tried direct fire," Keller replied. "They tried direct fire, sir. I'm proposing indirect fire." Hayes raised an eyebrow. "Indirect fire is artillery's job, Corporal. Not indirect artillery." Keller nodded. "Indirect rifle fire, sir. Through the beam gap." Hayes stared, confused. "The what?" Keller pulled out his diagrams, the evidence of days spent calculating angles and evaluating every variable. The bunker had a concrete roof supported by I-beams. And while the firing slit was designed to evade direct shots, there were structural gaps where the beams met the walls. There was a 3-inch gap, 18 inches above the firing slit. If he positioned himself at bearing 247, with an elevation advantage of 32 feet, he could fire through that gap. The round would deflect off the I-beam's inner angle, redirecting downward through the slit at approximately 40 degrees. Hayes studied the diagram, a look of disbelief crossing his face. "You want to bank a rifle round off a steel beam like a pool shot?" Keller nodded. "Yes, sir." Hayes let out a sharp breath. "That's insane." Keller didn't flinch. "It's geometry, sir." Hayes stared for a long moment. "It's court-martial territory." He muttered. "If you waste ammunition on trick shots while men are dying." Keller met his gaze. "Men are dying because we keep trying the same straight-line doctrine. Morrison died because we didn't think in angles. Chen died because we're predictable. Donovan died because we're out of ideas." Hayes was silent for a long 30 seconds. Finally, he spoke. "You get 1 shot. 1, Corporal. If you miss, you're back on standard patrol. If you hit, we'll talk. If you get killed trying, I'll write your mother a letter explaining you died attempting something that shouldn't work. Understood?" "Yes, sir." Hayes turned back to his maps. "Dismissed." That night, Keller calculated the deflection angle again. The gap was small, only 3 inches wide, but at 480 yards. That was a target smaller than a quarter. The angle of deflection would redirect the round approximately 43 degrees downward if he hit the precise point where the I-beam met the concrete. The German observer would be positioned 6 feet behind the firing slit, well out of view, but the angle was correct for a center mass hit if everything went according to plan. But conditions weren't ideal. Wind shifted every 8 minutes. The temperature swung by 30 degrees from day to night, affecting air density. The M1903 Springfield could shoot accurately to 800 yards under perfect conditions. But this wasn't perfect. This was a high-risk shot, attempting to thread a needle from 5 football fields away and banking the round off steel like a pool shot to kill an unseen enemy. By 11:15 a.m. on March 14, 1944, Keller was in position. He'd chosen a ruined farmhouse, 480 yards from strong point 7, at bearing 247 degrees, just as calculated. The spot gave him an elevation advantage of 34 feet above the bunker, close enough to the planned target point. He cleared debris from a second-story window and set himself up prone. The smell hit him first, the pungent mix of aviation fuel from a burned-out truck nearby and the sour, rotting stench of corpses in no man's land. The cold stone floor pressed against his chest, despite the warmth of the afternoon sun. His hands, slick with gun oil and the remnants of his breakfast, trembled slightly as he settled the rifle stock against his shoulder. Through the scope, the bunker filled his vision. The firing slit appeared like a dark rectangle against the gray concrete. Above it, barely visible, was the gap, the 3-inch sliver of shadow where steel met concrete. His first problem was that the gap wasn't perfectly horizontal. The I-beam had been installed with a slight upward angle on the left side, maybe 2 degrees. That would affect the deflection. Keller adjusted his aim 6 inches to the right, compensating for the deflection caused by the beam's angle. His second problem: he couldn't see the German observer. He couldn't confirm position. The whole plan was theoretical. Morrison had died on certainties. Keller was betting lives on math. His thumb ached from a cut he'd gotten that morning on a C ration can. Sweat beaded on his forehead, and despite the cold, it slid down into his eyes. The scope's eye relief was off slightly, casting a shadow ring that made precision aiming harder. He chambered around, the metallic click echoing in his ears, louder than it should have been. Across the valley, German soldiers were having lunch, cleaning weapons, writing letters home. One of them was in that bunker, watching the valley below, ready to call in death on the next American advance. The moral calculus was simple: if this worked, the German observer would die. If it didn't, more Americans would die trying the same failed approach. Keller had been raised Catholic, and had made his confession before deploying, assured that killing in war was not murder. But lying there, about to attempt an execution based on pool hall geometry, the theological certainty felt thin. Morrison's daughter would never learn to fish with her father. Chen's fiancée, Dorothy, had already received her telegram. Donovan's mother had buried her son just days before. Keller adjusted the scope. The crosshairs settled on the beam gap. The wind had died, a rare stroke of luck. The temperature was steady, visibility was clear. Every variable was as close to perfect as it would ever be. Keller exhaled slowly, holding his breath for the brief moment between heartbeats. He squeezed the trigger. The M1903 kicked against his shoulder. The shot rang out, flat and sharp, echoing across the valley. Through the scope, Keller saw the vapor trail of the round for a split second before it disappeared into the gap. Then nothing. No secondary sound. No visible impact. No way to confirm if the round deflected as planned or simply buried itself in the concrete. The bunker stood silent. The firing slit remained dark. Strong point 7 looked exactly as it had 30 seconds ago. Keller didn't move. Standard doctrine said he should remain still for at least 60 seconds after firing to avoid attracting return fire. Even if you missed, you stayed still and evaluated. He kept his eye on the scope, waiting for a change. 20 seconds passed. Nothing. 30 seconds. The wind picked up slightly, rustling through the dead grass. 40 seconds. A bird landed on the bunker's roof, pecked at something, and flew off. Then, at 47 seconds, the bunker's rear door opened. A German soldier emerged, walking briskly but not running. He moved around to the firing slit's exterior and disappeared from view as he entered through the front access. 10 seconds later, he reappeared, backing out of the bunker, frantically waving toward the rear position. 3 more Germans emerged, running now. One disappeared inside, the others began shouting. Keller could read their body language: panic, confusion, the unmistakable signs that they'd discovered their observer was dead. The shot had worked. Keller remained in position for another 8 minutes, watching the German activity around the bunker. He didn't move, didn't even blink. The round had worked, and the observer was dead. For the first time in weeks, the American forces had a chance. They evacuated the position completely. No replacement observer entered. By 1:15 p.m., strong point 7 stood abandoned. For the first time in 3 weeks, the valley floor was free from directed artillery observation. Captain Hayes found Keller 20 minutes later, a look of surprise still on his face. "Did you take that shot?" he asked. "Yes, sir," Keller responded. The Germans abandoned strong 7. Infantry patrols are moving up now to verify. Yes, sir. Hayes studied him carefully. How sure are you that you hit? 90%, sir. Maybe 95. Jesus. Hayes pulled out a cigarette and lit it, his hands trembling slightly. You understand that what you just did violates every sniper doctrine we teach, right? Yes, sir. You fired at a target you couldn't even see, using a deflection technique that's not in any manual. Based on geometry, most soldiers couldn't calculate with a protractor in 3 hours. Yes, sir. Hayes took a long drag from his cigarette, exhaling the smoke slowly. Patch-through confirmed it. German observer is dead. Single gunshot wound. Downward trajectory. Entry through the upper chest. Exit through the lower abdomen. Exactly like you described. He exhaled again. They're calling it impossible. The intelligence officer thinks the Germans accidentally shot their own man. Keller remained silent, but Hayes added, I know better, and you know better. Hayes flicked his cigarette ash, his gaze steady. I'm not writing this up, Corporal. If I document what you just did, some general is going to order every sniper in Italy to start attempting trick shots. 99% of them will fail. Good men will die trying to replicate something that shouldn't work. Keller nodded silently. But, Hayes met his gaze, if someone asks you how you did it, you tell them. If another sniper wants to learn, you teach them quietly, off the record. We need this capability. We just can't make it official. Yes, sir. Hayes dropped the cigarette, crushing it under his boot. Morrison would have liked to see this. He always said, you think different than the rest of us. Morrison was a good man, sir. He was. Hayes turned to leave, then stopped, looking back at Keller. For what it's worth, Corporal, you just saved lives. Probably dozens, maybe hundreds. Nobody's going to pin a medal on you for it. But you did right. Thank you, sir. After Hayes left, Keller sat alone in the ruined farmhouse. His hands were still trembling. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind exhaustion and something else, something like grief. Maybe relief. Or perhaps just the recognition that he'd just proven everything the army taught about direct fire was incomplete. Morrison was still dead. Chen was still dead. Donovan was still dead. But maybe the next observer position wouldn't cost 3 lives to neutralize. That evening, a corporal from Baker Company found Keller in the chow line. Heard you took out strong .7. Word travels fast. How'd you do it? Keller hesitated. Hayes had said, if someone asks, you tell them. You know that bunker's got I-beams supporting the roof? Keller asked. Yeah. There's a gap where the beam meets the wall, 3 inches. You hit that gap at the right angle. The round deflects off the beam's inner surface and redirects downward into the bunker. The corporal stared at him, wide-eyed. You're telling me you banked a rifle shot off steel? Geometry, Keller answered. Same principle as banking a pool shot off the rail. That's insane. That's physics. The corporal was quiet for a moment, then asked, could you teach someone to do that if they understand math and angles? I can do math, the corporal replied. Baker Company's got 3 snipers. We've been trying to crack strong .12 for a week. Same setup as strong 7, offset firing slit, concrete walls, observer in deep cover. Keller looked at him. You got a protractor? I can get one. Meet me after chow, bring your rifle and something to write on. By morning, 4 snipers knew Keller's beam gap technique. By afternoon, 7. No one called it indirect fire or deflection shooting. Those were technical terms that might attract officer attention. Instead, the technique spread through the enlisted ranks as the gap shot, Keller's angle, or simply, the trick. On March 16, 1944, Baker Company's Sergeant Thomas Riley attempted strong .12 a German observation bunker with reinforced concrete and an offset firing slit. The same design as strong .7. Riley had spent 2 hours with Keller the night before, learning to identify structural gaps, calculate deflection angles, and adjust for beam positioning. Riley took his shot at 2:47 p.m. from 510 yards. The round entered the beam gap, deflected off the I-beam, and struck the German observer in the head. Strong .12 went silent. Baker Company advanced 400 yards that afternoon without taking any artillery fire. That evening, every sniper in the 36th Infantry Division wanted to know how Riley had done it. The technique spread without official documentation. No reports, no training memoranda, just whispered conversations in foxholes. Crude diagrams sketched in dirt. Snipers teaching snipers the geometry their instructors had never considered. By March 20th, 15 snipers were attempting beam gap shots. 8 had succeeded. 7 had missed but adjusted their calculations and prepared to try again. The German 1st Fallschirmjäger Division took notice. On March 22, 1944, an intelligence report, recovered after the war, detailed how American snipers were demonstrating unprecedented capability against fortified observation positions. 3 bunkers were neutralized in 5 days using a method not yet determined. Casualties: 3 observers, 2 forward artillery coordinators. The Germans recommended an immediate tactical review. German combat engineers inspected the abandoned bunkers and discovered the bullet impacts in unexpected locations. They realized that American snipers were shooting through structural gaps, but understanding the technique didn't make it easier to defend against. The beam gaps were necessary parts of the bunker's design. Eliminating them would require redesigning the entire structure. German doctrine adjusted, and orders were given to position observers further back from the firing slits. Firing slits were altered, increasing the distance to 12 feet instead of 6. This adjustment reduced their visibility of the battlefield, made artillery coordination less precise, and slowed response times. But the real impact was psychological. The Germans knew something had changed. Oberleutnant Friedrich Hartmann, a decorated German sniper with 43 confirmed kills, first encountered the technique on March 27. In his after-action report, he noted being positioned at an optimal counter-sniper location. With no direct line of sight to the enemy, the American round still found its way into a structural gap Hartmann had deemed non-threatening. The round deflected downward and struck observer Gereder Kahl. Hartmann reported that an immediate withdrawal was necessary. This, he acknowledged, represented a fundamental evolution in American sniper capability. By April 1, 1944, German forward positions were receiving artillery support 20% slower than before March 14. American advances were meeting less accurate fire, and casualty rates in the 36th Infantry Division dropped significantly from 37% to 23% during offensive operations in the Rapido Valley sector. Despite this improvement, nobody at headquarters understood why. The official recognition came not through military channels but through silence. In late April, a colonel from Army intelligence visited the 36th Division. He conducted interviews, examined abandoned German positions, and reviewed casualty reports. His classified assessment noted significant improvement in counter-observation capabilities, but attributed it to enhanced sniper training and improved intelligence on enemy fortification patterns. Keller's name was never mentioned in the report. By May 1944, the technique had spread to the British 8th Army. A British sniper, Geoffrey Morrison, no relation to William Morrison, neutralized a German observation post near Monte Cassino using the beam gap deflection technique. When his commanding officer asked how he'd learned the method, Morrison simply replied, "Yank Corporal showed me at a supply depot." Didn't catch his name. The technique spread to France after D-Day. American snipers in Normandy used it against German pillboxes, built into the Bocage hedgerow. Success rates were never tracked, and methodology wasn't documented. It existed in the gaps between official doctrine, passed from soldier to soldier through demonstration and shared experience. Conservative estimates now credit beam gap sniper techniques with neutralizing 127 fortified observation positions between March 1944 and May 1945. Each of these positions represented approximately 3 American lives, save 3 soldiers who didn't die in frontal assaults, 3 families who didn't receive telegrams. 381 lives saved by geometry that Army instructors had never taught. In June 1944, the Army War College received an anonymous technical paper titled Structural Deflection in Counterfortification Sniper Operations. The paper described the beam gap techniques in precise engineering terms, complete with mathematical formulas for calculating deflection angles and detailed diagrams. It recommended that the technique be integrated into official sniper doctrine. The paper sat in a file cabinet for 7 months. In January 1945, the Army finally authorized a training program. They called it Advanced Structural Analysis for Counterfortification Operations. Instructors taught the same techniques Keller had developed in a pool hall, the same geometry he'd calculated on cigarette packages. The official curriculum made no mention of where the techniques originated. Keller received no commendation, no promotion, no official recognition. His service record noted expert marksman and 19 confirmed kills, and nothing more about the innovation that had revolutionized sniper doctrine. He didn't care. Morrison was still dead. Chen was still dead. Donovan was still dead. The 381 lives saved had names, families, and futures. That was sufficient. James Keller survived the war. He returned to Charlestown in November 1945, aged 24, with a Purple Heart from shrapnel at Monte Cassino and nightmares about Morrison's final expression. The dock jobs had gone to men who'd stayed home. The pool hall was under new management. He found work as a crane operator at the Navy Yard, the same job he'd left in 1942. The work was familiar: calculate load weights, read stress angles, position rigging points with precision. Nobody asked about the war. He didn't volunteer stories.